Okay. All right. Well, looks like we are finally live. We'll give it a second for LinkedIn and YouTube to kick in. And I think we are good to go. Well, welcome everybody. Today is a very informative conversation, I think, on everybody's minds. Tariffs. So we'll be talking to the pro in the business. Shane is joining us from Avalara. We're super excited to have him back since, I think, Shane, what was it? Liberation Day we talked last time?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, first off, thank you guys for having me back. And I was looking at my notes from last time and it was like March 13th and Liberation Day I don't even know if it was termed that at that point. But yeah, wow, a lot has really transpired since then.
I couldn't agree more. I dare say in 30, 60 days with China on the horizon with that whole negotiation, we're going to see it's going to be a completely different conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll hold our breath, but by way of introduction, Shane will pull up a couple slides, have you run through, if you wouldn't mind, just everything that's going on. Do also want to note my partner in crime, Glenn Saunders, is joining us today. We'll be covering on the second half a lot of what we can do to optimize, utilize NetSuite. But I think most importantly, hearing from Shane, hearing from his team on really the pros, the resources who have the finger on the pulse. They've got a tremendously large team who is very proactive in making sure that you know what's going on. Because as you'll hear from Shane, there's a lot going on. But I'll pull up the slides, and Shane, you want to kind of kick things off and share with everybody?
No, absolutely. And thank you, gentlemen, again. And just for a quick overview, just for folks that don't know who Avalara is, I mean, we are, for the past 20 years, Avalara has been the leader in really cloud-based tax compliance services. And compliance is the key word here. So while we deal with a variety of things of domestic sales tax, use tax, property, business license, cross-border is also an incredibly strong part of that based upon the team and expertise that we have. So, I also call out, on the NetSuite side, we are a long-standing strategic partner of NetSuite with over 4,000 shared customers. So just to kind of let everybody know who we are on that front. But yeah, so last time we spoke was back in March. I figure, a key date just came out last week with August 7th. And, thinking about this from a historical timeline perspective, and I will call out, at Avalara, we have this thing called Tariff and Trade Tuesday. It's a webinar, RGM, myself, a couple others host every Tuesday. We're going through a lot of this stuff on a weekly basis to make sure our clients, prospects, partners, everybody is really informed on what's going on. We also have several blogs. So there's links in here after, but this is the most recent thing here. So August 7th, taking several steps back, 6 month steps back. This really started back at the beginning of February, where China, Canada, and Mexico were in the crosshairs of trade. 30%, or excuse me, 25% on both of those, and China received a 10% tariff rate. And then really from there, it escalated to April 2nd. And again, I was on the call, I think March 13th, before it was even coined Liberation Day. Well, Liberation Day happened on April 2nd. About 50 plus countries received. It was no longer Canada, China, and Mexico anymore. It was basically the globe. And basically all these other countries, over 50 countries, received higher tariff rates than current. And then everybody else received a 10% baseline tariff. Well, markets kind of went crazy over that 7 weeks. And basically the administration said, okay, we're going to put these tariff rates on pause for 90 days. July 9th is the date that we're going to look at forward. So July 9th hits. And what happens on July 9th takes another pause to August 1st. So August 1st is when, a couple weeks ago, this is now everything in motion. So basically what's come out is that, there's a universal 10% tariff rate on all markets coming into the US. And then for 70 countries, there's additional higher tariffs over that 10% on those markets. So we have all of that content on our site of what specific markets are receiving X tariff rate, et cetera. I'll have a slide in a minute on it. But then going through some other highlights from this month is Canada. Canada was originally 25%. They got bumped up to 30%, and now they're at 35%, which is huge here. One of our largest trading partners, and we're still going back and forth with them. They're at 35% tariff rate. Mexico just got a 90-day extension, but all of the other tariff rates that are currently in play in relation to steel, aluminum, are all still applicable. You mentioned China. China was another one where things really escalated throughout that April-May timeframe. Then there was some agreements that were taking place, and a lot of talks that happened. One was in London. One just happened last week. Now China has a 90-day extension that took place, starting on the 11th. So November 10th is the date ahead to see for China. When we think about China, think about a 30% really baseline. They have a 10% reciprocal, and then a 20% IEEPA fentanyl as well. And then India is one that, 25%, another major trading partner of ours, they were at 25% as part of this August 7th tariff. And then just due to oil and the whole Russia conversation, they're going to actually get bumped up to 50%. So adding another 25% on there. The other key thing here is, I'm mentioning these key trading partners of ours. The other big one that dropped is the end of Diminimus, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But just so everybody is aware, this is absolutely critical, especially in the D2C, B2C world of selling. Diminimus is the threshold at which goods can be imported into a country and not assessed duties. The United States used to have a $800 de minimis value. So if you were a U.S. consumer purchasing goods from another market outside of the U.S., you would not be assessed duties. So think about all the foreign marketplaces out there, all the talks around the Sheins, Temus, et cetera. This has really been a hot topic, and especially it's actually been a bipartisan topic closely for the past 2 years. Back in May, the U.S. cut off de minimis for any goods coming in from China and Hong Kong. So any goods coming from those markets are now assessed duties. Coming up on August 29th, de minimis is being removed from all other countries importing in. So if you are a U.S. consumer or you are an international seller shipper and you're sending to the United States, you are going to be assessed duties and taxes on those goods that are under $800. So there's a lot to go into that, but these are really some key pieces over the past 15 days of really what's dropped. So we can go to the next slide here.
Of course.
So here's just again, if you go on our site, we have some blogs that actually have all of this lined up. But 35% tariff in Canada if it's not covered by USMCA. Mexico, the 30%. Brazil's at 50%. As part of these discussions from April 2nd to August 7th, you can look at some of them actually drop. So Taiwan, it was proposed on April 2nd at 32%. They're coming in now at a rate of 20%. So you can really kind of see here, and again, these are just kind of snapshots of some of the larger markets here. So.
Shane, could you share what framework means versus what's actually been agreed upon?
Yeah, I mean, so China has a framework in play that nothing has actually been, solidified by any means, and there's other things that are as part of those discussions. Everything around the chips and magnets, as you think about, they want our AI chips, and then we also want their magnets and resources to create these things together. So there's also with some of these key markets, there's other things that are happening behind the scenes. But a framework is basically, it hasn't really been signed off on specifically China. These other ones, though, they are all in play as of August 7th.
Awesome.
Yep.
I wouldn't say awesome, but thank you for that.
Absolutely. So I touched upon the de minimis piece a minute ago, but just as some context here. So if you look at the left-hand side of this graph, these are the volume of de minimis qualified shipments that were coming into the United States since 2015. And this is all from the U.S. Customs Border Protection Agency, they've been putting out tremendous resources and stats recently, which is fantastic. They have that visibility here. But basically in 2015, the amount of parcels that were coming into the U.S. under de minimis was 125 million. Fast forward to last year, it would hit 1.36 billion. Over 60% of those coming in from China. So this really kickstarted this whole conversation, if you guys remember me talking about in March, of like this whole safety concern around low value goods, the fentanyl piece, et cetera. And this is why it's always been this bipartisan component of the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there had been talks about it, and on May 2nd, the U.S. did eliminate it for any sort of, parcels goods coming in from China or Hong Kong, country of origin, China, Hong Kong, eliminating that de minimis value. Well, as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act then that took place at the end of, I think it was signed at the end of July, there was a clause in there that basically said de minimis for all other countries is set to be revoked by July 15th or something, 2027. Well, it's now August 29th, 2025. Like we're 2 years ahead. So this just got dropped. And this has been very speculative over the past few months. But August 29th, starting August 29th, de minimis is going to be removed for all these parcels coming in. And you have to think about it in a couple different ways. I mean, they're putting some guidelines out there in terms of, well, if these goods are coming in from a carrier or like a FedEx, DHL, UPS, et cetera, a non-postal carrier, they're going to be applied the applicable duty rate based upon what's on that country. But if it's coming in by way of postal, there are several different frameworks, and you know, guys don't have to memorize these, but so this is how convoluted it can get. Minimum of $80 flat for any goods shipping into the U.S. by way of postal from another market. Minimum of $80 flat fee for items containing goods with from a market that has a tariff rate less than 16%, or $160 flat fee for goods coming in from a country that has a duty rate of 16 to 25%, or a $200 flat fee for countries that are coming in from over 25%. So, I mean, this is, I don't know how Postal is going to react to this, because everybody's going to be kind of moving these out. I think the analysis I read was the real break even is if it's the value of the good is $500. I think that's the most economic way to use it coming through here. But the other key part about this is that by removing de minimis, it's part of Section 321 for goods coming in under $800. That's going to be removed, and you're going to have to require an HS code, HS6, or most likely an HS10 on all of these goods now coming in the United States. So you need to understand what the duty rate is going to be if you're doing any sort of business transactions here. What is that duty rate going to be? If you're doing D2C, you're going to want to make sure that you're illustrating those costs to the end consumer through a fully landed cost at checkout, making sure you're driving conversion, transparency. And then on the compliance side, you're going to need to make sure that you have an HS code on all of those goods coming over, so they're not getting stopped and pushed back from CBP or other governmental agencies. So this is a really key piece here.
Yeah. And when we talked earlier, Shane, the big one on that was all of these goods and updates of descriptions and the harmonized codes. Like, how do you anticipate organizations adapting to that massive change, and all of a sudden this new requirement for harmonized taxation codes on all of these goods that previously have really been untaxed?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, and it's we've been talking about this for the past 6 months. It's like, how do you be more proactive versus reactive? And one of the first steps in being proactive here is, I would say, look at as far up in terms of your catalog chain or ERP that you go, and ensuring that all of the goods that you have within that all have classifications on it, to ensure that if it's going to specific markets, you're set. You don't have to worry about it. It also will help dictate any sort of duty rate that would then be applied to those as well. So, I talk about this in a minute, just on the key pieces of data that really being proactive that you're going to need to ensure that you have on your full catalog of goods.
Yeah, and do we have mechanisms in place to even capture? We talked about this before, not just from the consumer or business side, but from the government side to actually gather the taxes on these.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's been a big thing of there's a lot of articles out there right now is how is CBP going to be enforcing these pieces. I will say they've been pretty active. I have a slide in a minute on they're very active in terms of LinkedIn these days, in terms of ensuring that they're getting the message out there that they are enforcing this stuff to full degree. But yeah, to your point, I mean, a lot of these, the enforcement is going to be interesting to see how this comes in, especially on the postal standpoint. I mean, you can kind of read between the lines that these high flat fee rates, they're really trying to make it a deterrent that goods and parcels are flowing through these international postal streams.
And Shane, I wanted to ask with respect to, I know in your Tariff Tuesdays, you're surveying quite a few folks, and with the PPI stats coming out earlier this week, seems like maybe they're delaying a little bit with China to get in all that holiday shopping, but it seems like based off of those results from what I'd seen, prices are finally getting passed to the consumer. Are you starting to?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the big question from an economic standpoint, and even every month with the metrics that are coming out. I mean, everybody's kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in terms of, are these goods going to start being passed through? What's been happening right now is, and you can even watch it from a timeline perspective in the U.S. The transportation spot rates. Anytime any of these have duties or tariffs were delayed, you would actually see, those markets you're getting goods from. And I'll just talk about China, for example, specifically the Shanghai to LA spot rates, back in May and in early June, they were the highest they were on year. At the beginning of January, I think they were around 2,500. They were over $6,000 on a spot rate, a 20-foot container coming from Shanghai to LA. Then, so people are still but think about it, if you got to pause on these duty rates, what are you going to do? Well, let's front load and bring in as much stuff to the US as possible, so we don't risk ourselves that these are going to be, this pause is going to go away, and then we're going to be on the hook for paying these rates. I was just reading an article earlier today, and it looks like that's subdued a little bit. It looks like kind of the supply, at least on the freight side, is kind of even right now. But there have been these extreme spikes in terms of when these pauses were announced to when there was really a high demand for these transshipments to get these goods in the market as quick as possible. So back to your question though, of everybody is building inventory within the U.S. right now at the lowest duty rates they can get. At some point though, now August 7th is in here as part of this. The polling questions that we have, I would say well over 80% are saying that they're doing a mix of, they're going to either illustrate these duties at checkout as a line item, they're either going to bake them in as some sort of surcharge, or they're going to try to figure out a way to maybe push some of them to the consumer while the others are, while also eating some on their own. So, but in all three of those scenarios, some cost is getting pushed to the end consumer.
Right. Wasn't there a big fight over adding that in on Amazon and, not wanting that to be visible to consumers, that this is the reason for the cost going up?
Yeah, and I don't think it was for years. I mean, I've been in this space for 15 plus years. Always the best practice is illustrating duties at checkout, this whole fully landed cost quote. The largest driver of conversion is presenting full prices up front. You as a consumer always want to know, what is the actual cost of the good to get to me? So if something shows up, the last thing I want to do is actually pay another fee. I don't think that's what Amazon was really alluding to in those. I think they were actually putting it on specific pages. They walked that back. So I don't know the full details on on those things, but just know that you should be, as a best practice at checkout or anywhere, if you're not including those costs somewhere, illustrating those to the end buyer. So I was talking a minute ago just about the whole CBP and how they've really been enforcing, specifically on LinkedIn. It's amazing the posts that they have. But here's some wild statistics that have really come out, and they've been pushing these out, I think, every 15 days or so. So currently this year, I'll have you guys look at the numbers on the bottom. This year, the CBP has collected $136 billion worth of total duties, taxes, and fees since January. To put in perspective, last year as a whole, CBP, from an annualized standpoint, 2024 as a whole, collected $88 billion. They have already well exceeded where they were last year. And if you look, really the difference here is based upon this additional basically $68 billion. And that's coming from these IEEPA tariffs, the Section 232s on automobiles and other ones. So if you look at the graph here, the part in orange that we highlighted, those are all net new tariff, duties, taxes that have been collected this year versus prior years. And if you're on these social posts with CBP, they are enforcing these things. They are making sure that you are not using loopholes to get your goods in, that you are calculating duties, that you are being collected on these duties. Because obviously, they've exceeded last year's figures, and I'm sure this is going to be a big talking point throughout the year on how much the government's actually been collecting through these streams. So enforcement is being amplified very, very loudly by them.
Yeah, fascinating to see that. From everything I've read, automotive is definitely getting crushed with the USMCA, and it sounds like I think Japan, from what I read, actually made out pretty well in their framework.
Yeah, UK made out really well too. They even got cut on some other Section 232. So yeah, I mean, some of them have turned out well, but they're all more than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
What are the goods that? Because I know there's still certain between the pre-negotiated, not NAFTA, but trade agreement between Canada and Mexico. Because I know some organizations, or I've read that are starting to bring stuff into Mexico to change it so that they pay the lower rate for it coming from Mexico. Have you started to see some of that as well?
Well, that's a really great point. And then also I'll talk about kind of USMCA in a second here, because there's some interesting
MCA. I apologize. I should.
No, you're all good. There's some other stuff that came out. So to your point there, though, previously, if you, some retailers or some businesses, they used to basically send their goods. Let's just say they're in Germany or in China or wherever. They would actually send those goods over to Canada or Mexico, primarily Mexico. And then basically when you would order a good in the US, it would actually fulfill out of Mexico because it was cheaper labor, cheaper for the 3PL. And then they wouldn't get hit with the Diminimus because it was all under $800.
Yeah.
Now moving forward, that's not going to be the case. And, one of the key points that we've set as one of these data points outside of tariff code classification, your tariff codes, is country of origin, because country of origin is really what is dictating the specific duty rates on it. Which country is it coming from? What's their duty rate? And then using that HS code to identify, are there additional restrictions on that? What specific good is it? Does it qualify for an additional exemption or not? Et cetera. So yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing, though, just on USMCA, for Canada and Mexico currently right now, there is a clause that for any goods, Canada right now, it's a 35% tariff rate, and then 30% tariff rate, I believe, for Mexico. Any goods coming in from those markets into the U.S. Would be exempt from duties if they had, or the tariffs if it was classified as USMCA. So wild stat here is that in Canada, I think, what was it in March? It was about 34% of goods being imported into the U.S. from Canada. 34% were qualifying as USMCA. So basically, they were duty free. 50% from Mexico to the U.S. Well, RBC actually just put out a stat the other day that now 92% of goods imports coming in the U.S. from Canada are qualifying for USMCA. So it's amazing to see that number go from 32% qualifying up to now 92% or 38% to 92% in June. And, some hypothesis is that, they've limited it to specific goods that really do qualify for USMCA, or there's been manufacturers out there that they haven't basically gotten their certificate for USMCA really. And now with this pressure coming down to be duty exempt, tariff exempt, they're actively trying to do that. Now, I do know there was some news this morning on some, contentious things between Canada and US on the future of USMCA and how quickly that's actually maybe negotiated this year. So more to come on that front. But, that's one of our strategies, with working with clients is saying, do you have USMCA eligibility on these things, and have you certified and gone through those specific channels? So this is, we call these the 4 horsemen of global trade, the 4 puzzle pieces of global trade, how to be proactive versus reactive. I mean, you really need to understand what is the de minimis threshold for your business that's not going to be assessed duties. That's the first thing you really need to understand. Country of origin, you need the data point on where are your goods being substantially transformed, manufactured. That's going to determine at least the baseline tariff rate that you're going to have. Tariff code classification, you need that Rosetta Stone. You need that unique identifier on all of your goods to understand what specifically it is. You really fuse these 3 things together, and then you get your duty rate, and then you add it to your multiply it by your declared value to get the monetary value of what specifically the monetary wise what that cost is going to be. But you really need to be due diligent and proactive, understanding what markets you are from the cost perspective of de minimis, what are the thresholds, country of origin, and the tariff classifications here.
And as far as country of origin goes, I think I was listening to Tariff Tuesdays as it relates to the pass-through from China to Vietnam as an example. It seems like they're still trying to figure out the percentage there, whether it's 80, 60, 40%, et cetera.
Yeah, it's that 40% transshipment rate that they've basically put out currently right now. And it's not even just for Vietnam. It's basically saying if there's going to be any markets that are going through some transshipment loopholes, which I think is a very wide term, and they're still kind of narrowing down that. But basically is if you're putting these goods somewhere else and saying that they're coming from a market that is a lower duty rate, you're going to be assessed an additional 40% on top of the base that you already have from whatever market you're coming from. Gotcha. So yeah, it's one of these things CBP is also pushing out in terms of the enforcement. So that is very key right now. So yeah, thanks for pulling this up. We've been talking about the variety of ways over the past few months in terms of how do you really navigate these tariff fallouts. I mean, the first thing here is, again, this proactive versus reactive. Get all of your data and information together. Get your HS codes validated. If you don't have them, ensure that every good has an HS code on them. Ensure that you have the details on country of origin. Have the ability to basically simulate landed cost scenarios, which all 3 of those things that Avalara absolutely helps with classification, calculations, and content. And then also, I just mentioned the whole USAM eligibility piece here is if you're USMCA eligible, make sure that you go through that process so you're not being assessed those duties unnecessarily. The whole inventory piece, we talked about the transshipment there from Shanghai to LA back in May, June. How are you going to adopt your inventory strategy, bringing it over during these pauses, like currently right now with China, there's 90 days, understanding where that procurement strategy and inventory currently sits. The pricing strategies, we also, kind of went through here of like, are you going to provide those at checkout? Are you going to bake those costs into your goods? Are you going to do kind of a split between both? You eat it versus passing it on to your end buyer. So understanding that, and also providing a DDP shipping with the landed cost information. So this is critical too. We're going into holiday season on the retail industry side of things. If you're an international retailer, obviously we're going into the biggest time of year. The last thing you're going to want to do is sell into the US, probably one of your top 3 markets, and not then provide some sort of illustrative of understanding of what the duty rate is going to be to your US consumer. You want to make sure that you're providing those costs at checkout ahead of time to drive conversion. I know most likely it's going to be more expensive than last holiday, but you're still at least giving them that transparency and knowing that they're not going to get stuck at the door for additional funds. Resourcing, this is more on the manufacturing side, and everybody's been kind of waiting until August 7th in terms of, well, what are we going to do here? Where should we start manufacturing? Now these rates are pretty much in place. There's really no further dates out there except that August 27th date, which is India at the 50%, and then the August 29th, Diminimus, and then November 10th for China. But other than that, I mean, these dates or these rates currently right now, from what's been illustrated, these are the rates. There's no further pushing. There's no further deadlines. So understanding where you're going to produce. And then lastly, thinking about how this all comes down the funnel, what sort of impact is that going to have on you from a modeling and financial perspective? We're seeing week over week in terms of these earnings calls of how is this, impacting the year, Caterpillar, all the auto industries right now, really understanding how to wrap your head around that from a financial perspective. So again, proactive versus reactive on this front.
Absolutely.
So kind of wrap things up here, in terms of where Avalara stands on this front is a lot we talked about here. And I would think about Avalara cross-border as 3 C's, calculations of duties and taxes, HS tariff code classifications is the second C, and trade content and restrictions is the third. So, we talked about what is the duty rate going to be, whether it is de minimis, whether you have HS codes or not. We have the ability to calculate all those duties so you have a better educated guess, or you could even just put those into your cart at checkout if you are a D2C seller, to illustrate those out. The tariff code classification. Have you guys heard me talk more about tariff codes ever? This is the key piece here. If I'm not trying to get something in mind, get your catalog classified. It's a requirement. It is the Rosetta Stone. Everything has a unique identifier. This is so key, and we have a variety of ways from self-serve tools to a team of 250 individuals that are actually can go through and provide the highest level of accuracy. And then obviously understanding, can something ship or not? Can it be exported? Does it have additional flags that a government that you need to provide paperwork on in order to get that good into a market? That's really our trade content and restrictions piece. And then just the last slide here, I think I do have one more maybe. We're pumping as much content out in real time as we can. Our blog, our marketing teams have been fantastic, so you can hear me talk now for the 30 minutes. You can join our tariff and trade webinars every Tuesday. And then also on top of that, we have blogs out there that have all the tariff rates currently announced, how to handle de minimis, etc. So it's been amazing the amount of content we've been putting out. We've been hearing great feedback on all of these things. So yeah, that's really kind of the state of everything right now. I think I've kept it into my 30-minute allotted slot.
Well, we certainly appreciate you giving us some time, and I know you've got a heart out, but we've got a couple of questions that are starting to trickle in, Glenn, that I think you're in a good spot to answer, and a couple of examples I think we can run through.
Yeah,
but,
sure. I can do my best. I'm not near as good as Shane, obviously. So
well, and also, if, just because I have to leave, feel free to send those over to me separately, and we'll try to answer those, and we'll funnel them back through you guys. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Shane. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, thanks for the opportunity. Yes. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. See ya. All right. Well, thank you, guys. We've got a couple of questions, a couple of examples to not only illustrate how you can do things from a Avalara perspective, but I think more importantly, how you can do things with what you got with NetSuite. So I did want to go through a couple of examples. First being, we do work with a chemical manufacturer. And of course, what did they do to help with the tariff management? What we did with them was put together a kitting script to recognize additional lot numbers so tariff materials could be kitted in a priority order before new tariff impacted shipments arrive. Largely, this change directly supported the customer's operational agility during a sensitive pricing period. What does that mean? We ensured the inventory allocation matched tariff strategies. Glenn, anything you want to share on that piece and that example there, or keep going?
I mean, you and I were talking prior to this, kind of prepping, and a lot of what this boils down to is one. I'll harp on what Shane said, is having good data in your system, knowing your products, your classifications, what is going to be impacted by a tariff. So making sure your product catalog is correct. But then, a lot of what NetSuite enables is not so much they have a solution that's just going to, bam, help you out, but it's a framework that you can utilize to do dynamic pricing like that, what we did for our customer, where ensuring that they were using the most important material first and ordering that material in a timely fashion so that they were getting their lowest possible cost prior to tariffs going into effect. They have long lead times on their production cycles. It's not like they're just producing wham bam overnight, more of a job shop style. So they may have a couple of months lead time on a job, but they wanted to go ahead and kit it prior to it being finished because, again, tariffs, the price, their margins locked in. They can't renegotiate just because tariffs change. They've got customers that have already had contracted pricing. So understanding your supply chain and knowing what you can do to dramatically impact that, or what, if we have that conversation with you all as a customer or a prospective customer, here's how we can potentially help optimize, strategize within the NetSuite ecosystem with data to make it happen for you all, so you're not left holding the bag at the end of this.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to the basics. With transfer order tariff mapping as an example, we enhance the item receipt to transfer order process to really carry over those related fields. So impacted by tariff and tariff rate, giving you the reporting capabilities and transparency needed to track the tariffs accurately across those inventory transfers, bolstering that compliance and cost control. So there's a lot of basic things that, while tinkering is necessary, to your point, Glenn, it's all about good data that you can report on and be proactive in this.
Yeah, and that is critical, is understanding the data in your structure and using that to make decisions. Unfortunately, in this type of scenario, there's no just easy button to press and say, do this for me. You really have to have a proactive strategy of how you're going to go about doing things and what actions you can take as an individual, as a company, to impact that strategy.
Yeah, and I think the other one I did want to bring up is just the notion of the capabilities of NetSuite's landed cost. And I know that what we've done before with a couple of folks is really focus on that allocation, across the categories like freight, import duties, inbound transportation, and that's going to give you accurate financial reporting, and COGS tracking as well. So again, setting up the basics is critical in this.
Absolutely. Getting a fully landed cost and understanding the cost drivers in your product mix and your materials is critical. We've done some things where more direct allocation, with our landed costs, where you can allocate directly from a vendor bill back, because, part of the challenge for a lot of organizations is your pricing based off of an expected landed cost.
Yeah.
And you actually don't get that landed cost until a month later from the freight forwarder or something to that effect. And that product, depending on your inventory turns, could have been used in a consumption or gone out the window. And so, modeling that can be quite difficult. So, again, proactive, strategic on it, on how you're thinking about that, what the potential impacts could be, and then modeling what happens if there are increases. How does that impact your margin, and what do you need to do to mitigate those?
Yeah, the next one I did want to bring up was another, I think, critical piece to look at as we talk about the data, the custom fields, is looking at the existing product data structure and identifying the product families to make sure that they're aligned with tariffs. I think it's so easy to overlook, but building a process that correctly flags hardware, enabling accurate markup behavior in NetSuite is often overlooked but critical.
Yeah, I mean, the quality of the data is tantamount in anything you're going to do. If you don't have good, succinct data in your system, it's going to create more challenges for you as you operate. So it's an excellent opportunity, because you kind of have to do it now to look at your product catalog, streamline how things are quantified in there to drive the costing strategy, the pricing strategies, and look at these things. Because, not only are we dealing with quite a bit of inflation from post-COVID, money and things like that, but now it's really international trade is going to drive up the cost of a lot of goods. And how do you as a business incorporate that in and win in the long game for what that's worth?
Yeah, and I think another good example here is on the transactional side. I have another example where we implemented a dynamic surcharge logic that automatically applies 5% tariff-based fee on the sales channel. So while we're still allowing for customer-specific exceptions, but we're helping in those pre-negotiated pricing terms.
That's right. Yeah. So a lot of customers proactively went ahead and said, we're going to add a 10% tariff surcharge on all of our deals. And to accommodate that, kind of created a switch that said it's on, it's off, because again, we've gone back and forth on this a few times, so that they could just dynamically add 10% to the price as a tariff line item. Yep, absolutely.
So I have a couple questions here that we were provided, and I appreciate everybody being active here. And if you have any other questions, we're happy to jump in. But the first one is on de minimis impact. So with the removal of de minimis exemptions for all countries, how will this change the landed cost calculations? And Glenn, any NetSuite workflows in place to capture and report these duties in real time?
It sounds, and again, Shane's the expert on the actual calculation, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm the expert there. But building that financial model based on the costing into your landed cost and creating a landed cost allocation for de minimis items from a purchase standpoint, especially if you're drop shipping, is going to be critical so that you can automatically add that in. And from a customer side, I think, Shane's very correct in that transparent pricing is critical on what you're going to do. And then, from the NetSuite side is, hey, when we cut that purchase order, we need to ensure that our estimated landed cost on that transaction line item validates and calculates that this is going to fall under the de minimis threshold and what the tax implication is of that.
So next question is on lessons learned from the China pause. And I think this one probably fits nicely with Causey. But given the recent 90-day pause on certain Chinese tariffs, have you used or do you have any recommendations for temporary tariff relief in the past to lock in cost advantages? Can NetSuite help accelerate buys before deadlines?
So I don't know that native NetSuite could, but again, honestly, the Causey is a great one to bring up. There's also the new NetSuite AI connector I was playing around with in limited capacity the other day, but accelerating those types of purchases. Unfortunately, the system is not going to have, hey, on this date, any purchase order. And it's really about when it actually lands in the US, not necessarily when the order is placed. So you have to really understand your lead times. But as far as that goes of like, when do we actually need to order stuff? Your best bet, in my opinion, is to take your supply chain data and utilize another tool like Causey or some AI or even just reporting in BI to understand your thresholds and when you need to order. And also how much inventory are you willing to put on the water and tie up in capital. I mean, I think that's the other thing is it's not like that's free money. You're putting capital to work, and how long is your buy through? Are you putting yourself at risk because you're tying up a couple of $1 million in inventory that you hope sells through, but if prices increase, are we going to see demand plummet? How much is demand going to be impacted from that? And I think that's the other side of it. It's why this is such a difficult challenge for organization organizations is how much should I buy? And I think, that's where, we can do some analysis and help look at inventory usage and turns and say, how much capital do you want to put to work here? And what does that mean for the business? What's the margin that you'll get on it? And also, I also think you'll see customers, they'll start to increase the price pre-tariff to capture as much margin as they can because of the uncertainty. So I think it's both ways, kind of cuts both ways there.
All right. Well, that was the last of our questions. We're at the 45-minute mark. Certainly appreciate you all joining us today. Please bear in mind, Nuage is more than just a consulting practice. We are a NetSuite optimization team, really trying to drive all of your strategic decisions and be an extension of your team to make sure you're making the right decisions in the right manner. But Glenn, I'll leave things to you in closing. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
No, these are always great conversations, and it's so fun to have the experts on. Shane, obviously, in this particular scenario, and our big thing, again, we want to be the right partner for our customers and help them make the most out of the investment that they have in the NetSuite ecosystem. Because it is a very powerful tool. And a lot of times, we talk about this all the time. Customers are really only using a percentage of it, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. And our goal is to get you to really using it as a strategic tool as it's intended to drive business value and business decisions.
Well said. Well, we certainly appreciate everybody joining us today. Please feel free to send us questions. I'm at louis.balla@nuagecg.com, Glenn at glennsaunders@nuagecg.com, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. So without further ado, we'll wrap things up. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Glenn, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Louis.
All right. We'll talk to you guys soon.